Hello everyone and welcome back to another Backlot Banter movie review. My name is Tyler Hazel. I am joined by my co-host, whose sick and twisted brain was formed by childhood abandonment, Tanner Dykstra. And today we're here to talk about Winnie-the-Pooh, Blood and Honey, a slasher film based on that classic whimsical childhood character that we all know him. I don't really love. I just never cared about Winnie-the-Pooh.
Winnie-the-Pooh's alright, I guess.
But if you want to talk to us about this movie, if you got a chance to see it in theaters, or if you're just interested in the idea of childhood characters coming in, killing you in your sleep, you can join our Discord. That link is in the top description. And when you're there, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, and leave a comment letting me know which character you'd like to kill you.
Oh, that's a
Tanner,
good prompt.
We have seen Winnie-the-Pooh, Blood and Honey.
One of the lucky few.
We'll talk about that. And I'd like to know your thoughts on this film.
Tucker, Winnie-the-Pooh, Blood and Honey sucks. So there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Okay. It's just a bad movie, and frankly, if that's not what you're expecting going in, expect that, frankly. And I don't know why your expectations were so high in the first place. But if I had to be nice to Winnie-the-Pooh, Blood and Honey, I have a sledgehammer to my head and a chain around my neck, much like some of the victims in this film do. I'd say that it is a film that poses an interesting novelty, okay? It gets people in the door, and it knows that it knows where its strengths lie. Sometimes. I think there's long stretches of this film where we spend too much time with our boring, dull-ass human characters.
We'll talk about those.
But at the same time, you know, I think some of the especially the Winnie the Pooh look is a good one. And the kills are brutal at times. Yeah. Brutal enough, I will say, for what this film is doing. So,
yeah, I fall in the same camp. I think that I'm going to start off being relatively positive, and it will not be reflected in my review score because, while I think this is a really terrible movie from most accounts, I was pleasantly surprised by a few aspects of it. I do think that it looks a little bit better than you would expect for a movie made with basically just an idea and a whim and $100,000, which is impossibly cheap for a theatrically released film. It has that novelty value, and yeah, you're right. I like the Winnie Pooh look, and some of the kills are good. So there are reasonable elements in there that might make this slightly better than a lot of the really crappy horror films I've seen because there's intrigue to it, and so I will remember it because of that. There's a lot of really forgettable horror films out there that I think are worse than this, and I'd rather watch this because there's entertainment value there, there's intrigue. But at the end of the day, still a very bad movie, and I think primarily because of the pacing, because of the script, because of the characters, because of the actors, none of which are delivering any intrigue for this movie. It really is just, you've got a guy in a Winnie the Pooh mask and a guy in a pig mask who's supposed to be Piglet killing people. That is the conceit of the movie, and you're right, it knows that's where its strengths lie, because that's where the best elements of the film are, but also 60% of this movie is just a bunch of British, like, college-aged women in a house doing stuff and doing really terrible reaction shots, and none of them are interesting characters at all, and there's no, like, setup or payoff for any of these characters. It's really poor writing, which I think is why this film never exceeds its own concept as, like, the only thing that it has to stand on.
Yeah. And frankly, I don't really know where to start with this one. Where do you think we should start, Tucker?
Well, the basic concept of this film is that Christopher Robin knew Eeyore, Piglet, Pooh Bear, Owl, and Rabbit when he was a kid, and he much like Andy from Toy Story had to leave his childhood friends to go off to college, and he comes back with a wife to, like, show her, hey, these were my friends when I was a kid, but they went sick and twisted while he was gone. They starved and they did eat Eeyore, which I think is kind of funny. And it's presented, I think, one of the more interesting visual elements of this film through, like, storyboard, like, hand-drawn animations of these characters, which is actually pretty good. But that's the concept of the film, but it's not the plot of the film.
Because, Tucker,
most of the runtime is the bunch of college-age girls who have no connection to Christopher Robin or Pooh Bear, or they just show up and then you see some boobs and they flirt around and then they die. And that's where most of the runtime of the movie is. It's a very strange balance.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of praise will be lumped on this film for, the concept of, taking advantage of the now open from copyright law Winnie the Pooh
Yeah.
characters. And you would expect, especially from the opening scene of this film, for it to be about Christopher Robin. But no, it's about a woman who is recovering from the trauma of having a stalker break into her home,
Yeah.
and her...
But that's like a B tier plot line, even, and this is not really fully fleshed out, and there's no like explanation for
her
it.
half-dimensional friends are all there, and
True.
they all get killed, and we've discovered that Christopher Robin is being held captive at the sort of in the 100-acre wood,
Yeah.
and he's being like Abu Ghraib tortured by Winnie the Pooh.
Jesus, yeah.
And it's...
He has this whip made of hair?
Yeah,
that's kind of weird.
It's bizarre. It's just bizarre, the choices that are made. And I don't even mean that in a wholly good way, because of course, at the end, folks, we're spoiling Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey.
No one cares.
No one cares.
No one cares.
Christopher Robin comes back and like again tries to reason with Pooh, and he runs away. So don't worry, Tucker.
Yeah.
Christopher Robin will be in the next film when Winnie the Pooh returns. And
next year? 1 year from now.
1 year from now, and goddamn, I don't care, because he's awful.
No.
The actor's awful. Character is nothing. We were making fun of the moment in that opening scene where he's just repeating the same 2 lines of dialogue over and over as Winnie the Pooh and Piglet like, Boo. Like they do the slasher walk towards him for a minute, maybe 2 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's my biggest problem with this movie. I've seen a lot of really bad horror movies, but a really strong example of how terribly written and paced this movie can be in specific moments, and I actually think a lot of moments, is that it does a lot of repetition, of stretching out the tension in horror moments by having characters repeat lines, repeat actions, repeat insert shots of the killer walking towards them, their reaction to being scared, and these things go on 3 or 4 times longer than they should. And even at 84-minute runtime, with a pretty sizable chunk of that at the end being credits, it has so much padding, which is not a good sign for such a short film. And it just shows that, especially with these uninteresting college-age British characters that they have, there's no reason to have them around other than to be kill fodder. And you could have allotted that time differently to develop these characters a little more, which, not saying that would make the movie exceedingly better, but I think it would have made it a little more interesting, because that runtime would have been used for development rather than repetition. And those repetitious moments are when I got out my phone and read the Wikipedia article for this movie, because I'm like, I see what's happening here. I've seen it for 15 seconds, and usually that'd be enough for that to happen. And then they repeat it 2 or 3 more times, and that's a full minute of the 84-minute screen time that did nothing to progress the film other than they just ran out of ideas. They had to repeat shots sometimes. I don't know. It's really strange.
Yeah. And what you said of running out of ideas seems to be this film's motto, really. Because they're like, okay, Winnie the Pooh and Piglet are fucked up, and they torture people and kill people.
Oh yeah.
And what else about the movie? Nothing else about the movie, actually.
Yeah.
Because you want to talk about the kills, the horror of it all.
Yeah.
Because we call them brutal, and it's $100,000 budget, so there is shitty CGI blood splatter aplenty.
There's a lot of CGI blood.
There's
really bad.
that
After Effects app on your phone, CGI blood.
There's that one moment where that woman gets like the machete or whatever put through like her mouth as she's screaming or whatever, and it's shot in silhouette, but you can still kind of tell that her mouth is open, but the sword is just like behind her head.
Yep.
It's
absolutely.
a lot of, it's just cheap stuff like that, frankly.
Yeah. It is, but it's also a reasonable mix of, actually that was pretty brutal, and they kind of did a reasonable job with some of the makeup. I mean, when he's getting whipped on the back by the hair whip, like that's pretty good back scar makeup of flesh being torn open. So I'm surprised at how good the horror moments were here. I think it would have been a lot easier, obviously, to just cut away from all of the blows, but they show a good amount of gore here, and that's where some of the talent of making a horror film, a very cheap, easy horror film like this, lies. I think it's a lot easier to not show anything and just like assume the horror, because it's more difficult to make the prosthetics and the makeup that look like someone's been tortured or maimed or like head chopped off or arm missing or whatever. And those effects, I think, blood aside, were surprisingly good for how cheap of a movie this was to make.
Yeah. Another thing I'll say is that, and this is sort of an issue with all slasher movies like Halloween. You're like, wait, how strong is Michael Myers?
Yeah.
When he can like pin somebody and lift them up over his head, essentially. But it's like doubly or triply an issue with Winnie the Pooh, because you're like, he just karate chopped that person's hand off. And he with ease apparently just tore this woman's head clean off of her body. You're like, so we're just doing whatever he needs to do in the moment, frankly. And you know, whatever. Like it's not well thought out in any manner. But is any aspect of this film well thought out? Absolutely not.
No, yeah, and that comes back to the concept being all that it has to go on, and I wonder what they are thinking about doing for a sequel, because bringing back Piglet is dead here, and it's just Pooh and Christopher Robin, and they're both coming back for that second movie. But if the movie is more about the dynamic between the two of them, which is not a good dynamic, but it is a dynamic that I find more interesting than just inserting a random group of characters who have no connection to the plot, that could be more interesting. But I smell it 1 year from now, sitting in the theater. What's that in the wind? Another random group of characters for Pooh to kill. And maybe have Rabbit and Owl come back, because canonically they're still alive, but we never see them. But I would be interested in seeing that, not only because it was kind of fun to have this, and they're making a sequel. Isn't that kind of wacky? But because Pooh and Piglet, and especially the masks and designs and presence of these characters, these killers, is easily the best part of the movie.
Yeah.
The Pooh mask with the ears twitching and his nose moving a little bit, and the lips going like this. He's like rubbing honey on his mouth. That is the best imagery of this movie. And watching him like kill someone while there's like either a combination of drool, honey, blood dripping off his lips, like that is the imagery this movie lands on. And there are some pretty solid horror shots of that mask, of the presence of this big burly body with that funny head. Like, I want to see more of that. And if with a bigger budget they're able to do a little more animatronic so his face is a little more animated, and get Rabbit and Owl back and give them grotesque animal masks, I think that could be pretty cool, and why I still enjoyed elements of this movie. Even though it's very bad on the whole, there's that spark there of that Pooh Bear mask is pretty interestingly designed.
I'll agree with you there for sure. It's weird that he has just regular human man hands.
Yeah, I think the canonical explanation is they're like half-breed human animal people.
Well,
because they say it quickly at the beginning.
Yeah, I guess so. I will also say sound mixing awful in this film. You
so
can
bad.
hardly
So bad.
tell. Maybe 70% plus of the dialogue is like inaudible.
Drowned out by
drowned
music.
out by the music and whatever. The hand thing reminded me of Pooh does a lot of like open hand slaps in this movie for some reason.
That's just his thing.
It's just his thing. It is just a weird, like, why is he slapping these people to death?
Yeah, very strange.
Is there anything else about Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey? Tucker, what would you give this movie out of 10?
Simple review, simple movie, simple score, 3 out of 10. Bad movie.
Yeah, I'm gonna go, I don't know, fine, 1.5 out of 10, I guess.
Yeah, not good. And don't see it unless you're into horror. If the idea intrigues you, if you want to like somehow find like a compilation of, oh, look at the shots of this Pooh Bear mask online, that's pretty much all you're gonna get out of it. It's all we got out of it. But I will be in the theaters for more of these. The novelty of it, of using public domain characters that we have all seen in more kid-friendly contexts being perverted into slasher films. This is a genre that I twistedly enjoy. I'm excited that there's this new weird subgenre coming up, and this was a bad start, but an interesting start to say the least.
No, yeah, and I don't anticipate that any of these films will be good, especially if we have this kind of backing behind it. The studio, these people creating this movie. And honestly, what I will say on the note of them being copyright free characters is that I hope that this isn't the direction that we take these copyright-free characters. Is this cheap, sort of reactionary, like, reductive sort of, what if we made them dark and gritty and edgy? Like, no, I want people who actually have care for these characters and what they mean to tell interesting stories instead of a stupid slasher movie that's awful. But anyway, I will also be seated in those movies, granted that they don't cost $15.
No, yeah. Oh, Fathom Events.
Fathom Events.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening to our review here of Winnie the Pooh. God, I said it when we started the movie as well. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. Bad movie. Don't go see it. That's a 2 thumbs down from Roger and Ebert here.
Crazy that we have a letter that's sometimes a vowel. Why is it sometimes a vowel? Why does that make any sense? Why can't it be a vowel all the time? Why can't all letters be vowels?
I'm not a languageologist.
Why do we differentiate between vowels and not vowels?
It's a great point.
All these questions and more will be answered in the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey review. Let's roll it.